It looks like some good news is on the horizon for Marvel because the early projections are in for their upcoming Deadpool and Wolverine. And if they're to be believed, it looks like Deadpool and Wolverine is going to set the record for the highest grossing domestic opening for an R-rated movie of all time. This article from Deadline is going into some of the details about it. NRG, Screen Engine, and other 3-week in advance box office tracking services are reporting a domestic box office opening for Disney/Marvel Studios' first R-rated movie, Deadpool and Wolverine, at $160 million to $165 million, which would not only be the best opening year to date, but also a record start for an R-rated movie. The first Deadpool, released in 2016, owns the record for the biggest R-rated opening at a box office with $132.4 million. Jumping over to the numbers, I have this chart pulled up that shows the highest grossing domestic openings for R-rated movies, and not only did Deadpool 1 have the number 1 spot, but Deadpool 2 actually has a number 2 spot that made around $125 million during its opening weekend. And if you look at the Deadpool movies by themselves, you can see that Deadpool 2 actually made a little bit more at the global box office than the first movie, even though it didn't quite make as much during its opening weekend. That brought in around $786 million globally during its entire theatrical run. Meanwhile, Deadpool 1 brought in just under $782 million during its entire theatrical run. So all things considered, these movies did pretty well. But one of the things I'm thinking about with Deadpool and Wolverine, because it's a strong possibility that this movie will gross over $1 billion at the global box office when everything's all said and done. But one thing that kind of gives me pause to think that's the case is I'm looking at these numbers right here. And even though both these movies had pretty strong opening weekends, I'm not saying the total amount they brought in globally is anything to scoff at, like Deadpool 2 bringing in $786 million globally. That's still a pretty good amount. But looking at that, I'm just thinking that's still quite a bit less than the $1 billion mark. It's not saying that these movies had huge drop-offs or anything like that. It's just it didn't have such a strong following as other movies like, let's say, Inside Out 2, which is had a pretty good opening weekend and is also going on to have some legs underneath it and not just cross the $1 billion mark. So I don't think we're going to see that with Deadpool and Wolverine. I can actually see Deadpool and Wolverine probably able to bring around $800, maybe $900 million globally when it's all said and done, which is actually still pretty good for Disney, even if it doesn't necessarily hit that $1 billion mark. Disney feels comfortable with the $160 million plus range for the Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman team up with filmmaker Sean Levy. Current pre-sales before the movie's July 26th opening are at $19 million, which is 15% behind Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, $187.4 million, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, $118.4 million, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever, $181.3 million. And this table that shows how much each movie in the MCU made shows Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Both those movies brought in globally around $850 million during their theatrical runs. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness opened up domestically at around $187 million. And in total, it brought in $952 million during its entire theatrical run. So that started off a little bit stronger than Deadpool and Wolverine is what that's being projected. And it made just under $1 billion. But you also have to keep in mind Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness had something like nearly 70% drop off during its second weekend because audiences didn't really like it. And I don't think we're going to see that when it comes to Deadpool and Wolverine. I think it's going to have a bit more legs underneath it because from early word or like some insider information coming out about it suggests that people do enjoy this movie. And I'm just wondering if people are going to come back to see the movie multiple times or if it's going to bring in more people through good word of mouth, if there's actually people waiting for good word of mouth before they watch it. Because with the way Marvel's been doing things recently, I can see that being the case, but still, it does seem like a lot of people are excited for this movie, and the early projections suggest that people are going to come out and see it during its opening weekend. I'm just wondering, though, if the people who are going to watch it during its opening weekend are pretty much just the people who are going to go see it, and then you're not going to have a lot more people coming into it. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. I do imagine this movie is going to do pretty well and actually have a decent hold during its second weekend, but we'll just have to wait and see. But one thing is for sure, though, Disney's had a tough time at the box office the last year, actually even last couple of years for that matter. And even if this is successful, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be enough to put them in the black, because I think they've lost quite a bit of money these last couple of years. But with something like this being a success, especially if it hits $1 billion, and then we have Inside Out 2, which they just released, which just crossed the $1 billion mark around a week or so ago. So yeah, this movie is going to be something that they need. But the question is, how is it going to impact the rest of the MCU? And I don't think it's going to have too much of an effect. Here, I'll go back to that chart that was showing that, because you got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 when that came out, that was pretty well received. And then soon after that, we had the Marvels come out, and that was their worst movie. So I don't think we're going to have one of those situations where if one movie in the series does good, it's going to necessarily have an impact on future movies, because I think a lot of audiences are basically just taking each movie as an individual basis versus trying to watch it because it's going to set up the next thing. Because I think most people don't necessarily care about that like they used to, where they're just going to watch the next Marvel project because they need to watch another to understand what the next one coming out is. Deadpool and Wolverine seems to be one that people want to watch because they want to watch Deadpool and Wolverine. I mean, that's a cool team up. People like Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman in their roles. So yeah, I can see this movie doing really well, and it's looking like that's going to be the case. But afterwards, when it comes to what Marvel's doing, I'm not so sure, because then we also have these rumors coming out, because the follow-up movie after this is going to be Captain America 4 or Captain America Brave New World. And according to some of these rumors, they're basically reshooting the movie again. They're spending, the budget is reportedly around $375 million for that, which is just insane, because that'd make it the second most expensive Marvel Cinematic Universe movie to date, just behind Endgame. And I don't think this is going to be one of those movies that people are really excited to see. I think this is going to be another huge flop for them. It'll probably do better than the Marvels, but I don't think it's going to be enough to make its money back, because with the amount they're spending on this, when you factor in marketing, they're probably going to need to make $1 billion at a minimum in order to break even. And just looking at what they've been making on their movies the last couple of years, the last movie they had that made over $1 billion was Spider-Man No Way Home, which was in 2021. And before that, it was Spider-Man Far From Home, which was in 2019. So I don't really see Brave New World making $1 billion, but I do see there's a possibility for Deadpool and Wolverine to make that watch. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Are you actually going to see Deadpool and Wolverine, or are you waiting for good word of mouth before you're willing to give it a shot, or are you just done with Marvel movies entirely? Let me know in the comments. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share the video, because it helps out with the channel. Thank you.